The Last Word with Stan Collymore.
Stan Collymore! Oh, yes!
Telling it as it is.
Instead of tweeting and putting on Instagram that Collymore's this and Collymore's that, come and tell us.
No holes barred.
Go on, Stan, make it epic!
Pure, unadulterated Collymore.
And Stan Collymore strikes.
A happy Monday to one and all, and a very warm welcome to The Last Word with me, Stan Collymore, bringing you my opinion, insight and thoughts from match day 7 of the Premier League. Every Monday I take a look back at the main talking points from the Premier League weekend, bringing you the biggest interviews on planet football, people, with giants of the game like Jurgen Klopp, Gary Neville, Gary Lineker and Ian Wright.
But what I had the problem with them was they didn't give me, they weren't giving me the platform to speak about what I wanted to speak about, because after a while, Stan, you know, you get your foot in the door and you think, yeah, this is going to be great. But they've kind of got a little place for you.
Finishing off with the news from around planet football. This is The Last Word with Stan Collymore. Come on!
The Last Word with Stan Collymore.
This is the world's biggest football podcast and we only work with the best. That's why we've teamed up with our friends at CT1 who've developed the incredible BT1. Now, we can finally have clinically clean bathrooms with no fungus or bacteria, banished to the Conference League. BT1 is the healthiest choice for your home and the most eco-friendly product for your bathroom. Fact. Plus it retains its colour, no more mould, no more fungus, no more bacteria, no more bad bathrooms. CT1 have done it again. So use new BT1 in your bathroom.
Stan Collymore.
A very happy Monday, everybody. I hope you've had a fantastic weekend. I'm flying solo today, and I absolutely love it. I love all of our co-presenters, whether it's Hugh Wizzy, Sam Miller there coming up in the next few weeks, the irrepressible Paddy Barkley, Emil Heskey. We're going to get some great co-presenters on during the season. But I'm going to go call Collymore on yo ass today with some punditry, some opinion. Why? Because we get into the mythical 8 games in. What does that mean? You'll often hear it on your radio shows and on your television shows. 8 games in. Quite simply, as a player, you couldn't really judge your performances until it was about 8 to 10 games in. Why? Because the manager may make lots of changes, especially now with squad rotation. So you get an idea of, is it a settled team? Who's your first choice left back? Who's your first choice centre forward? They all get to play with each other for 7, 8, 9, 10 games. And you usually start to see patterns develop in terms of how your team is playing, your Premier League team is performing and the form. That's why I give stats. It doesn't tell all of the story, but one that I'm going to pluck straight from the ether, and that's Brighton and Hove Albion. They don't take enough shots on. They don't have enough shots generally towards goal, and they don't have enough shots on target. So the first week of the season, they win, I think, 3-0. And everybody's like, Stan, you're talking rubbish about Brighton potentially being dragged in a race. Let's see what the stats say over the first 7 or 8 weeks. And the stats say they don't shoot very much, they don't score very much, and of course they're getting dragged in. That's why we use them. So a very warm welcome to this, it's a very sunny Monday up here in the Midlands. I want to get first to the big story. We tend to pick out, might be VAR protocol, it might be a meteor hits Old Trafford. Let's hope not tonight. We're going to preview the Manchester United against Arsenal game. But the big story this week, Alexander Ceferin. You may well think, who's that? Yeah, his name pops up. He's the chief of UEFA. He has come out and he's said that VAR should only be used in an offside circumstance for a clear offside. What is clear offside? Well, I guess it's when that line comes across, you watch Match of the Day on the evening and you're a body offside. The problem that we've got to at the moment, and we're seeing it every single week with your highlight shows, is that we're talking a millimetre here, a millimetre there. Dean Smith, the Aston Villa manager, bemoaned John McGinn's goal, his first goal against Burnley at the weekend, for being, here we go again. This is the 3rd or 4th time Villa have been done for 3 centimetres offside. So I had a poll on Twitter. I often have a poll of polls. You'll see it pop up. And the results are in. Drum roll. 16,000 of you voted, and the results are as follows. Should VAR only be used for clear offside rather than millimetres? Right, I want you to guess. Shout at your phone, radio, wherever you're listening to me. What's the percentage that said it should be obvious only? I heard you. Yeah, Jack in Burnley, 10%. Bob in Dagenham, 35%. But you're getting close. Obvious only voted 62%. So overwhelmingly, football fans feel now that yes, VAR should be used for offside, but it should only be used for what we would term obvious. The supplementary questions on Twitter, of course, came, well, what's obvious? Daylight, I think that we're talking about. We're talking about when that line comes across and you can see the body of the player is one step further than the defender. I think that would be common sense. Offside is offside, voted 33%. I voted in that category. I think that if you are going to have a technological solution that, unfortunately, technology is going to say, well, it's a centimetre, it's 0.35 of a centimetre, it is what it is, so I voted with a 33%, and the don't know's 5%. Keep them coming on Twitter, at Stan Collymore, 16,000 of you voted, but overwhelmingly, it looks as if the vast majority of football fans don't mind VAR being used for offside, as long as there's a little bit of leeway given to the attacker. Let's go to the Premier League punditry from the weekend with yours truly. Let's start with 12:30pm Saturday. Sheffield United 0, Liverpool, the runaway leaders of the Premier League at the moment. Let's give the tale of the tape, if we may. First win for Liverpool in the Premier League at Bramall Lane. Might surprise a few of you. Of course, a lot of those games were sort of early, mid-90s. That's at the fourth attempt. The Reds are unbeaten in 24 in the Premier League, 16 consecutive wins, 7 wins, of course, to start the season, which, as Gary Lineker did his maths yesterday, leads to 21 points. What was Jurgen Klopp's thoughts on the Liverpool win?
We started well, but then lost the rhythm a little bit. Was really difficult. We didn't accelerate in the right moments. The passes had not the right speed, not the right tempo. It was really, we didn't create the right ankles to bring play. But we had still our moments. When we had these moments, not often enough, to be honest. And that made the game then a bit hard for us and a bit tough. But all respect to Sheffield United, they did really well, and they did that over 95 minutes. That really deserves all the respect.
Jurgen Klopp, de Meister, there with his thoughts and opinions. Look, it's very simple football, and I think that it gets overanalyzed in a lot of newspapers and a lot of radio shows, which is why I wanted to do something where I can use my experience as a footballer, as a broadcast journalist, to hopefully bring some common sense. And lots of you agree, because lots of you are downloading the podcast. Thank you very much for that. But sometimes you can overanalyze performances. Sheffield United were very good. The 3 central defenders, particularly impressed with the midfielders. Scotland's John Fleck, Lundstram, Enda Stevens used to be at Aston Villa, George Baldock, supporting Ollie McBurney and Callum Robinson, another former Villa player. Sheffield United were very good. But in terms of a title tilt, and I've been in title races, I've been in a title race with Nottingham Forest, 94-95, Liverpool the following season, and Aston Villa were top of the table. John Gregory's Aston Villa were top of the table for quite some time. So I'd like to think I know what I'm talking about in terms of attacking every single game with one philosophy. Try and keep a clean sheet, and you're not going to play well every single week. You might have to come away with a scrappy off the shin or off the backside, coach will normally say, win, which is the difference sometimes between a title win and not. Don't forget, Liverpool only lost the title by the very slimmest of margins last year. So Liverpool, were they poor? Were they average? Yes, I think that by their current standards, they were a little bit flat. I didn't see anything tactically or technically that was wrong with them, other than they perhaps didn't move the ball quickly enough. I think that there were 1 or 2 players that were just a little bit below par, particularly in the engine room of the midfield. And they rode their luck. On another day, Sheffield United win that game 2 or 3. And like the Sheffield United manager said post-match, look, Norwich had their moment a couple of weeks ago against Manchester City. They won the game. We had a similar kind of amount of chances here against Liverpool, but we didn't take ours. But from a Liverpool perspective, the win is the win is the win is the win. And I think that keeping a clean sheet still, even with luck on their side, and of course absolute horror show for, well, on loan Manchester United goalkeeper Dean Henderson, Gini Wijnaldum creeps through his legs, is that for Liverpool, that could be the most important result of the season. And when we talk about great teams, and I think this is the Messi-isation, if you like, of modern football, or Ronaldo-isation, is you expect every single great player and every single great team to play well every single week. And do you know what? The great Manchester United teams, the great Liverpool teams, all had those moments, all had those games where they didn't play well but came away with the 3 points. As for Sheffield United, like Norwich and Aston Villa, need to start making Bramall Lane a bit of a fortress. All have been inconsistent. We'll come to Norwich and Villa shortly. Only really Norwich, I think, in my opinion, have looked very strong, very solid at home. I don't think Villa nor Sheffield United have had. So from the Blades' perspective, very, very, very positive in terms of the performance. There are players that are now growing into Premier League players that you may never heard of. Two of them, like I say, I know, in terms of Ender Stevens and Callum Robinson, both formerly of the Aston Villa parish. Sheffield United will be okay as long as they put performances like that in week in and week out, not just against the champions of Europe, but also the likes of Villa, of Bournemouth, of Brighton, etc., etc. Let's go to the South Coast and Bournemouth. It finished Bournemouth 2, West Ham United 2. Cherries now unbeaten in 3. One player I want to pick out, and one comment I want to pick out. Steve Bruce isn't my mate at the minute. He actually blanked me the other week when Liverpool played Newcastle because I've been critical of him. I was critical of him at Aston Villa, and rightly so. I think he spent a lot of money on some good players, some average players, but I don't think for me he's a very proactive coach. That's just my opinion. But then when you see people at football grounds, they turn their back on you, and he kind of turned his back on me. We'll come to Newcastle United down the line. But the comment that I always remember interviewing him when I was at TalkSport was that he said, Stan, whether it be players, whether it be managers, whether it be performances, we only ever talk about the top 5 or 6. We don't really care about others. And it's true to some point, which is why my punditry, my show, my platform will give us much airtime to Burnley, to Bournemouth, to Brighton, and dissecting them and be as critical of them and laud them as much as Manchester United, Arsenal, Chelsea. Why? Because Manchester United and Arsenal are 11th and 8th, respectively. They're not way ahead at the top of the league. We talk about them because they're historically big clubs. Let's drag you back to Bournemouth against West Ham and Steve Bruce. What's the relevance? Quite simply, the woeful lack of chatter around Callum Wilson as a England number 9 is staggering. And Steve Bruce's comments resonate with me from 6 or 7 years ago. He was at Wigan at the time. About nobody talks about the smaller clubs, everybody talks about the bigger clubs. If Callum Wilson was scoring in 4 consecutive games as he's done for Manchester United or for Arsenal, for Spurs, he would be napped starting the next 2 games for England against the Czech Republic and Bulgaria. We've virtually broke the back of the group. Harry Kane, yes, is our number 9, but again, shout at your radio, shout at your phone. Who is the player that we'll talk about if Harry Kane was injured in terms of leading the line for England? It would be Manchester United's Marcus Rashford, who's currently playing for a team 11th in the Premier League. So not pulling up any trees at Man United either. So for me, Callum Wilson, I've watched his performances and I've watched his growth. Absolutely fantastic movement. I think that Josh King working alongside him has been sensational, holds the ball up, runs into the channels. Very much an old-fashioned centre-forward, but with a modern twist that he can move left or right. So for me, I'm really enjoyed Bournemouth this season. I was heavily critical of them last. I think that the likes of Lerma and Philip Billing, that you'll have heard me talk about on this podcast, I think have been exceptional in terms of adding more steel in the midfield. Harry Wilson, of course, on loan from Liverpool, is fantastic with free kicks and corners. What they do need to do, though, is keep more clean sheets. They didn't do that against the Happy Hammers. Now, whisper it, West Ham fans, you weren't in my thoughts when it came to the best of the rest. Let me take you back to before a ball was kicked. Who would you have had as the best of the rest? I'm talking about position 5, 6, 7 and 8 in the Premier League. Yes, Leicester would have been one. Yep, I'll agree with you. Wolves is another one. Everton, perennials, yes. Watford, finished 11th last year but got to the cup final. West Ham were kind of in that group. But if you look at what's happened with Wolves, Europa League football, they only get their first win of the season this match day against Watford, ironically. Watford have driven to the cliff and happily jumped off it with 2 separate managers now. Everton have been inconsistent at home at best, and I'll come to why I believe the reasons are for Everton. So for me, all of a sudden, that leads Leicester City, the only team that have been, I think, exceptional. My favourite midfield, and again, I will come to them. But for West Ham United, all of a sudden, I'm looking and thinking, this is a good team. This is a team that likes to play and get the balls through the lines. You look at the back four, for example, Masuaka that got sent off the other week. What's the hope if you're a West Ham fan? The hope is that you can bring somebody in that will do equal job as a sticking plaster or better. Who comes back in? Aaron Cresswell scores a couple of goals in the couple of games that he's come back. I love the midfield. Yarmolenko, a lot of people talked about in the punditry at the weekend, but travels very well with the ball. Felipe Anderson, we know all about. Classic Brazilian technician. Mark Noble, Declan Rice give a nice balance. They give the graft. They give the local element, which is important to West Ham. And then up front, you've got Sebastian Haller, excuse me, that is a fantastic finisher. I think 24 goals in his last 26 games in the Bundesliga and Premier League. So can West Ham United be the best of the rest? Yes. I think, again, the London Stadium is going to be very important. They seem to have bedded in quite well. But scoring 2 goals at Bournemouth is no mean feat these days. I think only the best are going to do it, and I think that only the very, very best are going to come away with wins at Bournemouth. So West Ham United, I am watching you, and yes, you may well go on to be one of the best of the rest. Let's go to Villa Park, Birmingham B6, and the home of the 1982 European champions, Aston Villa. 2-2, Desmond, it finished at Villa Park against Burnley. Burnley, tailored to the tape, have only lost 1 of their last 9 against Aston Villa now. But the most worrying statistic for me as a fan, and for me as a pundit that just looks at Villa through very crystal clear glasses, not rose-tinted ones, Aston Villa have dropped a league high 8 points from winning positions. Very worried about that. If they win those games, they're comfortable in the league. So you could say, well, your glasses are full. Surely, Collymore, if they can turn taking the lead at Spurs, taking the lead at Arsenal, taking the lead at Villa Park against Burnley, and move that forward and progress as a newly promoted team, they're safe, home and hosed. Agreed. But I think that the other concern is the amount of goals that Aston Villa concede. 1.5 goals per game at the moment. To give you an idea, relegated teams are conceding about 1.5 goals upwards per game. And they're also scoring 0.75 goals per game. At the moment, Villa are doing okay on the goal scoring front. Let me just get the Premier League table up here. So Aston Villa have scored 8 goals, which is twice as many as Newcastle, twice as many as Watford, even 3 more than Brighton above them, 2 more than Everton. So on the goal scoring front, they're not doing too badly, save for the fact that Wesley, the big summer signing from Belgian football, hasn't hit the ground running yet. I think he's got 1 goal in the League Cup, 1 goal in the Premier League, and his performances have been critiqued by me, suggesting that he needs a good strikers coach to go down and show him the basics. Getting a lot of tweets from Villa fans over the weekend saying he's got to be dropped, so that's a little bit of a concern. But the bigger concern for me with Aston Villa is if they hover around this drop zone, the narrative is conceding too many goals, worry about their main central striker not scoring. Who's the man at the minute that you think of at Aston Villa? It's not Jack Grealish. He was the man that you thought about last season at Villa coming up. It's John McGinn. He's weighing in with goals. He's weighing in with important goals at important times in important games. And Sir Alex Ferguson spoke about him when he was up north of the border and saying, this lad is the real deal. Manchester United should look at him. So my worry, Villa fans, is that John McGinn's form outperforms Aston Villa. Aston Villa are doing okay, but in the bottom half of the table and firmly in the bottom half of the table, and Manchester United that are looking to actively recruit players in attacking positions, maybe in midfield positions, that John McGinn would be, and Aston Villa would be, have a hostile bid put their way. So we need to watch that one in terms of January. In terms of Burnley, Villa were absolutely ideal for Burnley to come down, graft very hard. You know what you're going to get with them. They're going to play balls into the channels. You know that they've got very good front men that can hold the ball up in Chris Wood and Ashley Barnes. Jay Rodriguez, of course, he gave it the little... are you listening, Villa fans, to the Holt end, having been at West Bromwich Albion for the last season or so? And from my perspective, Burnley will stay up because they have what Brighton don't have. They have what Villa don't have. They have, to a degree, what Bournemouth are trying to get. And that's strong mentality, strong physicality. So they will hurt and they will prey on weak teams this season with their physicality, getting crosses into the box. And unfortunately for Villa, they were won. Let's go to Stamford Bridge, where Chelsea beat Brighton and Hove Albion 2-0. Brighton 1 shot on target and a top-flight record. 9 losses on the bounce from one club to another. So Brighton have lost all 9 games now against one opposition, Chelsea. And that goes back to 1888. Even I wasn't born then. To the league founding. So Brighton's record against Chelsea is absolutely honking. What do we know about the Blues, the Chelsea? We'll come to the Seagulls shortly. Chelsea, 10 shots on target. Again, I think the biggest thing that, from an analysis perspective, that I was really pleased about from a Chelsea perspective was the seniors made a step up to the plate. Often this season we've talked about Mason Mount, Ross Barkley. We've talked about some of the youngsters, Callum Hudson-Odoi. Michy Batshuayi hasn't played, but the young crop of Chelsea players. It was actually yesterday Willian, Pedro, Jorginho, Marcus Alonso that stepped up and said, "Okay, Mason, you're having a fantastic start to the season. Everybody's bigging you up, but we're going to help you. We've got to fill these gaps. We can't expect these young kids to be exceptional every week. So it's time for the seniors to step up." And let's not forget, Chelsea have some very good players. A lot of these guys were title winners only, 2 or 3 years ago. So if Chelsea steer clear of injuries, I can't see at the moment, ironically other than Leicester City, a team that could attack third position and be confident. A lot of people before the season was starting were saying, "Oh, well, Chelsea, 2 transfer bans, lots of young kids, isn't going to work." And I was excited about them from day one. And you'll have heard me extol the virtues on the podcast. But I think that they should be aiming for third. That's Spurs territory currently. I think that Spurs have had their issues and problems, which we will come to, whether it be managerially, whether it be players wanting to go. So for me, Chelsea players, Chelsea's youngsters, should be aiming for third place in the Premier League. They will have youthful inconsistencies that creep in, but if you can have Willian, Pedro, Jorginho, Azpilicueta, Marcus Alonso fill in admirably as they did and feel part of Frank Lampard's team ethic, they will get success this season and maybe good for a cup as well. Brighton and Hove Albion, worrying. I'm not seeing this Graham Potter revolution of attacking through the lines football. I'm still seeing a football club that is, for the most part, pragmatic, that is going to win most of its games at the Amex Stadium by nicking the odd goal. And they just don't score enough goals. If you're looking at the Premier League table, they've scored 5 goals, which is only 1 more than the 2 that are currently rooted to the bottom in Newcastle United and Watford. And Brighton fans might call me out and say, well, this is a guy that's at the start of his own journey and he's having to get away from Chris Hughton's stodgy football. But still, nonetheless, if you're looking to play a more pragmatic football through the lines, you have to be getting more shots on target than Brighton have in recent games. And I go back to this point in punditry. Match day 1, I gave you the stats. And Brighton, I think, had 3 shots on target and scored 3 goals. And everybody went, well, there's proof, isn't it, Stan, that Graham Potter's doing very well and Brighton have upped their shots on target and goal ratio. Their shots, general shots, bearing in mind that Watford had 31 shots last match day against Arsenal. 31 general shots towards the Arsenal goal. Brighton and Hove Albion are averaging 2s, 3s, 4s, peaking at 6s, so they're miles off. That needs to do much, much better. Otherwise, they're going to get hugely sucked into a relegation scrap if they're not in one already. Talking of relegation scraps, let's go to Selhurst Park and Crystal Palace against Norwich City. Not so much for Crystal Palace. They're sitting pretty on 11 points. One of only, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams on double figures in points so far. And we'll come to Wilfried Zaha. I might have a controversial view for you very shortly. No winning 16 at Crystal Palace for the Canaries. And there seems to be a pattern developing here, people. But first, here's your weekly message from Delia Smith.
Where are you? Let's be having you!
So a bit of fun there. Delia, always welcome on the show. Maybe I should do her on one of the big interviews. That would be a great one. And Stephen Fry, of course, both board members at Norwich City. So what is that pattern that we're starting to see, Stanley Victor, with Norwich City? If Pookie don't score, Norwich don't win. His goals are worth 5 points. It's that simple. And they've only got 6. So in terms of Timo Pukki and his goals output, his creativity, add Todd Cantwell into that as well, is that for Norwich City, they need to find another way. Pukki isn't going to score 30-odd goals this season. He's just not. Todd Cantwell is a young boy that plays for England under-21s, may go and get senior recognition this year, but he's not going to be 15, 20 assists this season. There's going to be games, particularly at Carrow Road, where they look fantastic, and that was crystallised on that fantastic performance, against Manchester City. But in the Championship, they scored 96 goals, but they conceded the same amount of goals as Birmingham City and Stoke City that finished 16th and 17th respectively. If you do that, you are going to get relegated. And as I said the other week, it's not the performance at Anfield on match day 1 where you can play, but you get hammered and people say, well done little Norwich, it'll come good. And then you play Newcastle the next week, you beat them 3-0 and Norwich fans say, see Stan, if we stick to our philosophy, we're going to win more games. I said, then it's going to be Crystal Palace. It's going to be Aston Villa. It's going to be Southampton. It's going to be Wolves. And Palace essentially won that game fairly comfortably. So I'm asking the question of Norwich City, if you're going to continue to try and play at the back and you're going to have teams like Crystal Palace with Wilf Zaha putting the press on, do you have a plan B if it's not working for Pukki and for Todd Cantwell? And the answer is, at the moment, no. A -7 goal difference with only Watford and Newcastle worse. And what positions are Newcastle and Watford in? The bottom 2. Now, Crystal Palace, my former club, you're going to be hearing from Ian Wright talking about his early days at Crystal Palace. I was there, the likes of John Solarco, Eric Young, Andy Thorne, Mark Bright, fantastic team that finished 3rd in the last season of the old First Division. Crystal Palace have found it a little bit more difficult, actually. Even with a decent spend, they've really failed to make any headway into that top half of the table. So it's nice to see them early doors, 7 games in to be 9th. Wilf Zaha, discuss please. Involved in everything. I watched extended highlights and I kept on going through it. If I'm not at a game, I'll watch every single game and I'll watch the extended highlights. I'll record them and I'll go through them and I'll stop passages of play and go through it again, see patterns developing. Wilfried Zaha has been exceptional in his performance against Norwich. But for Crystal Palace, the continuing conversation will be, whether it become to November, December, January, Manchester United want Zaha back. Toffee's willing to put in 50 million bid for Zaha. Arsenal willing to break the bank. Is that he's not good enough. That may sound controversial, that may sound harsh, but I saw a guy that is given lots of the ball, so they're getting it right in terms of giving Wilf Zaha a lot of the ball, and a lot of you guys will point me to his statistics and assists and goals. Fantastic. But for the amount of ball he gets in good positions, right-hand side of the 18-yard box, a little step over, a little Cruyff turn here and there, a drive into the box. He's finishing his poor, and I think that out of every 5 or 6 crosses, great crossing positions he gets in, where he's got daylight to lift his head up, pick a crosshair, I think his decision-making is poor. So I'd like to continue this debate on Twitter for Mail. I shall be tweeting about it later on. I'll put this clip up for you. Crystal Palace fans who love Wilf Zaha will think I'm harsh, but Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Everton, clubs that are willing to spend 40, 50, 60 million on a mercurial player, have you watched him and have you thought, not quite good enough for us, or do you think I'm talking out of my hat? That was Palace 2, Crystal Palace 2, Norwich City 0. Let's go to Spurs. They win the game. Spurs have won 8 of the last 9 home against Saints now, so a 2-1 victory probably wasn't too much of a surprise. And I have a quiz question for you. What makes this fixture special? I was going to say unique, but it's not unique because there is one more that comes into this, one more club that comes into this. It's only the second ever Premier League fixture to be played in 5 stadiums. What was the other one? It involves Spurs, because Spurs have played in 2 or 3 stadiums. So which was the other team? So Southampton, for example. So we've had Wembley Stadium, Spurs, the Dell, Southampton, White Hart Lane, Spurs, St Mary's, Southampton, and the Tottenham Stadium, 5 stadiums. What's the other club? Quickly, come on. No, it's not Villa. No, it's not Chelsea. No, it's not Liverpool. No, not Arsenal and the Emirates. It's West Ham United. Wembley, Spurs. The London Stadium. White Hart Lane. The Bowling Ground and the Tottenham Stadium. 5 stadiums Spurs have played against West Ham and against Southampton. A little bit of trivia for you there. Hugo Lloris, proof why goalkeepers are goalkeepers and not outfield players. I'm sick to death in this era where coaches, pundits will have us believe that Edison or Alisson or Hugo Lloris are as good as outfield players. They're not. You choose to be a goalkeeper because you've got great reflexes and you want to save things. That's obviously at the fundamental core of what you want to be as a footballer. But this notion that you can teach goalkeepers, even 9, 10, 12 years into them playing, into being outfield players and be as good at both is ludicrous. It's a nonsense. So what we're doing is we're playing the ball back through the lines to our goalkeeper, and 1 in every 10, 15 back passes, a goalkeeper that doesn't have a track record in being able to make good decisions with the ball at his feet is trying to do either a Cruyff turn, a drag back, and that's what happened to Hugo Lloris. Now, on this match day, it didn't matter, but Spurs should know with their recent form and how poor they've been in certain games that they got away with that a little bit in terms of their character and belief and Bottle coming back into the game. But any other day, that's a cup semi, that's a game against Liverpool, against Manchester City. At this particular point in the season, in terms of the league games, that could be asking major questions lumped on Maurizio Pochettino and the playing staff that ordinarily they didn't have to be asked if the goalkeeper just did things very normally. And that is, you get the goalkeeper, you play it back to him, and he plays it very quickly to one of his back 4. Goalkeepers, please stop doing Cruyff turns. It looks very stupid, even more so when it doesn't pay off. Only John Stones is allowed to do that at Everton and Manchester City, particularly Manchester City, because they score a lot more goals than anybody else, so it doesn't really matter. The Saints, they'll just have enough. Really like Nathan Redmond, his growth into the team. My one major concern for them was where were the goals going to come from. We've got a really good interview with Charlie Austin coming up in the next few weeks. Of course, at West Bromwich Albion, had a huge fallout with Ralph Hasenhüttl. But from my perspective, Danny Ings has come in. He looks fit, he looks sharp. It's about him staying injury-free, of course, something he couldn't do at Liverpool, unfortunately. So we never got to see the best of him at Anfield. But he's a poacher. So then you're looking around the team at Southampton, you're thinking, do they have the ability? Do they have the technique to be able? Do they have the manager? Do they have the philosophy to be able to stay up in the Premier League this season? The answer is yes. James Ward-Prowse, I said, if they didn't score goals, he'll be, just like John McGinn at Aston Villa, subject to a hostile bid. They're getting results now. Not save for the Spurs result, but they're not dragged into the mire. You've got Nathan Redmond, Boufal, Danny Ings, Bertrand that I've just mentioned, Ward-Prowse, Højbjerg and Romeo sitting. So they look fairly steady from midfield forward. So my only concern for them, and I did have them in the relegation zone, was the lack of a striker. They've answered me, if not conclusively, positively in the last few weeks. So I'm not going to apologise to Southampton fans, but it's as close as you're going to get. Danny Ings has made the difference in terms of pushing them in the right direction. That was Spurs 2, Southampton 1. Now, what about Wolverhampton Wanderers? We've spoken often on the podcast this season about will they be able to balance out Europa League football. Of course, it's not going to be too far down the line where we have some of the bigger cup games, FA Cup games in wintertime. They've been drawn against their local rivals Aston Villa in the League Cup. Will they put out a second team? Will they put out a very strong team because they want to get to finals with the spend that they've had in recent years? Villa will probably put a strong team out as well, and it's a local derby. So that's another drain on resources that's going to be coming over the horizon. But this had to be a win for Wolverhampton Wanderers. They hadn't won a game, and I don't know whether you noticed on the highlights, Wolves fans are very loyal and very passionate about their football club. They've filled it to the rafters in recent seasons, but there were empty seats, and it was a little bit quiet. The away fans didn't help, there wasn't the whole bottom tier, I think, of the Steve Bull stand taken up by Watford fans, but it felt a little bit flat. It felt as if Wolves fans were waiting for a little bit more of an excuse to have a pop at one or two players that have been misperforming at the beginning of the season. No such worries. Very, very good attacking play, I think, that from Wolverhampton Wanderers throughout the game. I think that Neto, Traore, either side of Raul Jimenez, the Mexican, I think that took their opportunity very well and came into the team and gave real pace, a real change, a real difference. And I'm sure that Nuno Espirito Santo will be happy with that. First Wolves win of the season. And Wolves are off and running in terms of the Premier League. How this balances out, we've got the Europa League coming up again, of course, this week. And Wolves have to manage their resources very well. But I am of the absolute belief, even at this stage, Wolves fans, you've got your first win under the belt, so don't worry too much, along with several draws, is that Wolves can manage to get to the latter stages of the Europa League and, if not be the best of the rest in the Premier League, because I think that Leicester City are setting that pace and West Ham are setting that pace, is that 8th, 9th or 10th is still well within your reach, and it would be a fairly comfortable season to be able to manage both. Love to hear from Wolves fans on that one during the day at Stan Collymore, but I've got a weird situation. I look at stats, I watch a lot of games, both on site and analysis DVDs, scouting tools, etc., and sometimes stats just jump out at you and you say, this is making no sense. So I've dubbed this one the weirdness of Watford. 105 shots so far this season. The leaders of the league, Liverpool, that you would say have a lot of shots on target in a game, wouldn't you? Everybody's nodding their head. Have had 113 shots. Newcastle, at the bottom of the league, have had 68. Now, Watford are second bottom or bottom. Let's have a look. Watford, they're bottom of the league, 2 points. Newcastle have got 3 more points. So Newcastle, let me crystallise this again in your mind, have had 68 shots in their 7 games so far. Watford have had 8 shots less than Liverpool. And you can see it. You can see it in every game Watford play. They're getting players forward into advanced positions. You're thinking of Deulofeu, Sarr, Danny Welbeck. A lot of big up was given to Tom Cleverley over the years. Would he make it at Manchester United? He's now a senior pro. They've got Andre Gray on the bench. They've got Chalaboa on the bench. They've got, when you look at it, a team that really should be heading where they were last season or better, which was 11th in the Premier League. Lost the last game of the season, 4-1 against West Ham, because they were concentrating on the FA Cup 2 weeks after that, and getting to an FA Cup final. So sometimes when you give out dole out a platitude that says, a manager says it's the whole defensive unit, have been crap. We've got to defend better from the front. It's the whole team. It's not. The front part of the team are getting as many shots on target as any team bar Liverpool and Manchester City in the Premier League. So really the finger needs to be pointed at, yes, better shape, less porous, less ability to play through the lines. I think that Wolves got at Watford far too easy from the flanks, for example. But I'm pointing the finger at Capoue, Decore, Cleverley, Holebas, Cathcart, Dawson, Janmaat and Ben Foster. Ben Foster that ironically was kind of laughing and joking after the Manchester City result the other week in his post-match press conference. I'm pointing the finger at Watford and saying the front half of your team is getting the same stick as the back half of your team at the moment, which when we talk again, I'll come back to this point, everybody defends, Stan. It's the goalkeeper and it's the centre forward. On this occasion, Watford's front men and attackers and creators are doing a very decent job. They're not sticking the ball in the back of the net enough. That's the most difficult part of football. But the defensive unit at Watford is having an absolute shocker. 105 shots this season, 2 points, 3 points adrift at the bottom of the Premier League. One of the weirdest kind of dichotomies in terms of stats in the Premier League. Huge win for Wolves, plenty of good attacking play, clean sheet. They need to now focus on their home form. Southampton, Villa, Sheffield United next coming up for the Molineux men. All very winnable games. And then after that, three very, away games, 2 out of 3 very difficult ones. Manchester City and Arsenal, along with Newcastle United, are the next 3 away. So dare I suggest to the Molineux men that they put their resources into Southampton at home, Villa at home, Sheffield United at home. 3 teams that we're probably expecting to be in the bottom half of the table. Let's turn our attention, if we may, to Goodison Park in the city of Liverpool for the 5:30pm game on Saturday. Everton against the champions of England, Manchester City. A lot of people will give you punditry along the lines of, Fernandinho dived in, didn't he? That proves that Everton or Manchester City are a poor defensive unit. No. Whenever I do my punditry every week, I say, and I'm doing my predictions, I will put Manchester City, and it doesn't matter. You can almost do it blind these days. And the statistics proving it, because in the first 7 games, Manchester City, I think, has scored 27 goals, which the last time that was done was by Everton in 1884. So not only are they breaking records or getting near to breaking individual records as they nearly did last week against Watford for the highest ever score in a Premier League game, highest score in an FA Cup final since, Moses came down from the Mount of Olives or wherever it was. They're breaking records week in and week out. But in terms of when I do my predictions, I pick Manchester City 3, 4 or 5. That number is that simple. And the statistics back me up with that. 27 goals after 7 games. So where are we looking at the chinks in the armour? If there is a chink in the armour, at the moment, it is Fernandinho, a defensive midfielder playing at central defence alongside Nicolas Otamendi. And that is where the problem is. No John Stones at the minute. I don't think that's the massive loss. The massive loss is Aymeric Laporte, of course, that may well be out for quite some time. So if you're a team looking to put pressure on Manchester City, and you're looking at Aguero, didn't play, Raheem Sterling, Kevin De Bruyne, assist god, assist machine. Gabriel Jesus comes into the team, great performance. Riyad Mahrez, player of the year 3 or 4 years ago. We think of him as an impact sub now. That's how good Manchester City's attackers are. And he runs the show against Everton. Where is the chink in the armour? The chink in the armour is stop trying to play against Manchester City. Stop trying to get the ball down against them and play through the lines. One silver bullet in every season will come. Norwich City, they played through the lines, they got their result. But on any other day, it could have been 6-0 to Manchester City. The way that you take on this Manchester City team is you get bodies behind the ball, whether that be a central defensive 3 with 2 wing-backs, whether that be 2 protecting midfielders, and you play the ball longer. You nick the ball very quickly, and instead of transition being 2 or 3 passes through the lines, which Manchester City notoriously, they'll foul you, they'll pull you, they'll try to stop you on the halfway line to stop your attack, is that you play longer, you get it up to a front man, you get him to hold it, you get to run the channels, and you turn their back four running towards their own goal. And then, if you're in a position, and this has been proven only for seconds in games up to now, but when you put this back four under pressure, they are not the best back four in the world. They're just not. Give me Alisson, Trent, Andy Robertson, Virgil van Dijk and Matip as a unit all day long against Manchester City's best unit. That's my opinion. And the proof of that was that Pep Guardiola had to rip it up, 2 years ago? To buy in players because he wasn't happy with his back four. And he probably will still bring in somebody around December or January to prop things up at the back. But you can get at them. But if you are not good enough in your own back four and your midfield, and 99% of teams in the Premier League that is relevant to get the ball down and to outplay them and to have more possession than Manchester City, go beyond their midfield. Go over the top. And what you saw yesterday was times when Everton got joy down the flanks, putting the balls in the box, they created problems for Manchester City. So only the top 6 at their very best, or a freak result like the Norwich City result, can dent Manchester City. And for me at the moment, I look at it as a former Liverpool player and you say, yes, there's a healthy 5-point cushion. But the cushion that Liverpool need going into the winter months is 9 points. There is nothing at 9, 10, 11 points still may not be enough to stop this Manchester City side going on a roll from January onwards and winning every single damn game. So for me, yes, happy days at the moment that Liverpool have got a 5-point cushion, but you are going to need 9+ to live this fantasy in a lot of pundits' minds that, well, Manchester City, they can't defend at the minute. You can get at them, but there are ways that that you can get at them that I've just mentioned there. But even with, if it was me and you out there playing as Manchester City's 2 central defenders and we conceded 3, you know that at the other end, Kevin De Bruyne, that will, if he stays fit, go on to be PFA Player of the Year and Football Writers Player of the Year, is that you know that they're going to score 3, 4 or 5. Briefly on Everton. Everton need Moises Keane, Dominic Calvert-Lewin that got a goal and Richarlison to step up. They all look decent technicians, but I don't see any of them that I'm afraid of. I used to play against Everton teams that had Duncan Ferguson, that had Kevin Campbell, that had a presence that said, I want to be the man in this game to make the difference. Step up, the 3 of you. You've all got fantastic ability between them. But for me, I see 1 week it's Richarlison, 1 week it's Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Moises Keane has yet to come in and really make a statement for Everton, but I'm sure he will. Step up one of those guys and Everton can achieve their aims. If they don't and their mentality is, I'm going to leave it to somebody else, then they will not. Sunday, Super Sunday, please. Yes, please. Leicester City, 5, Newcastle United 0. I played in a Leicester City team in 2000 that scored 5 against a team from the North East, but it was the red and white half, Sunderland, 5-2. And it was a bloody better team than this Newcastle team. It was Kevin Phillips, it was Niall Quinn, absolutely. I think Mickey Gray might have still been there. And we won 5-2 and yours truly scored a hat-trick. It was the second to last game, I think, that Emil Heskey and I played together. And I still get Leicester fans when I go up to Filbert Street saying, oh man, if only you and Emil would have played together for a little bit longer. I concur. As it was, I ended up playing with Adi Akinboye and Trevor Benjamin. I rest my case. This was the Newcastle who played against Norwich City, wasn't it? And when I analysed that game, I remember exactly where I was. I was by the River Thames and I wasn't at a game. And I watched Newcastle at Norwich. And Phil Dummett, in his post-match comments, one of the defenders at Newcastle United, said something wasn't right in the warm-up. It wasn't sharp, it wasn't lively. And at that stage, I thought, Steve Bruce is a ticking time bomb. He's got a month and he's going to be out. He wasn't, because they've put in good performances since then. Won at Spurs, of course, put in a very good performance against Spurs. And you think they're okay. They've grasped the nettle. They're working for the manager. No. One crap performance, 2 or 3 good ones, another diabolical one. And that is heading one way, and that will be relegation, because if you can't have consistency in this league, if nothing else, as whatever you are, whether you're a passing team, a long ball team, a counter-attacking team, whatever your philosophy is, consistency has to be at the heart of that. And the biggest criticism you can ever make of a football team is that they didn't try. At Norwich, the narrative was that Newcastle United didn't try. And I'm accusing Newcastle United, their players, of not trying against Leicester City. Yes, you can have a player sent off and you're down to 10 men. It can be very difficult. Isaac Hayden sent off. I think it was 1-0. And it was silly. It was a reckless challenge. Look, those were 2 a penny back in the 90s, but we don't want to see that in football today. But make no mistake about this. If Newcastle had 12 men on the pitch, never mind 10, they could have been 5-0 down. Leicester ruthlessly took them apart. They're always up there, Leicester City, on the possession statistics. I've got them in front of me here. So possession overall in the Premier League this season. Manchester City 60%, Liverpool 57.6%, Tottenham 55%, Manchester United 54.9%, Leicester 54.7%. So Leicester City keep the ball a lot. They're one of the top 5 possession-based teams in the league. And Brendan Rodgers, that we'll hear from very shortly, basically said, I was very, very pleased. Actually, let's hear from Brendan Rodgers now.
Yeah, it was a very good performance in lots of aspects and good balance to the team. Firstly, you got to defend well, and I thought that our pressing was very, very good. We had a real hunger in our game, which is how we've been playing. And like I say, we showed all elements, our possession, and moved it quickly, and then on counter-attack we were a threat. But I thought second half we had a good demonstration of how to play against 10 men.
So as you heard there from the horse's mouth, as I was about to interject, we may as well have Brendan Rodgers saying it rather than me, is that he was particularly happy in the second half that although Newcastle United had 10 men, the way that Leicester City kept the ball really does dispirit a team with 10 men because they can't get the ball. You've always got that one man extra. It feels like when you're playing against it that it's 2 or 3 men extra. So Leicester City ruthlessly exploited Newcastle United. But I have to say, the work rate, the work ethic, if Newcastle United's players showed half of the amount of passion, effort to get their team over the line as their fans did, that didn't shut up from minute 1 to minute 93, minute 94, on an absolutely sodden day in Leicestershire, having driven down, as they all do, a couple of 100 miles there and back to support their team, then Newcastle United would be all right. It's okay for Steve Bruce to come out and put his head down a little bit and use words like, we lacked desire, we lacked hunger, we lacked passion. But what's he doing to instill that? That's twice this season. If he isn't happy with the performance against Norwich City, if he isn't happy with the performance against Leicester City, he needs to take players out that he felt let him down and put others in. It is that simple. If Newcastle United play like they do for even a third of the games, the remaining games of the season, 31 games, which was a shambles, an embarrassment. You can file it alongside Watford's embarrassment at the Etihad last week, a capitulation, then they will go down. Let's hear what Steve Bruce had to say.
We've got a following of supporters who've come in their thousands, and to hear them and the way they reacted to the team is typical of them. But we've got to give them something more to shout about than that, because it was, okay, the red card changes the game, but after that you need to show a little bit more desire and a bit more hunger and a bit more spirit amongst you. And certainly we didn't do enough. It was one of them horror shows.
So Steve Bruce, as I alluded to, lack of desire, lack of hunger. Jamal Lascelles. I mean, Jamal Lascelles is more famous now for coming out and saying how crap his team were than he is for his own performances on the pitch. Look, he's been a very good captain. I think he's a very good lad. Kept an eye on him, of course, since his early days at Nottingham Forest, and he's the real deal. But when your captain has to continually come out and make these pronouncements that we weren't good enough today, that in itself is desperately worrying. That rounds up your Premier League review of the weekend action. Let me just give you the top and bottom of the table as it stands before we go into our look at the Monday night football. Tonight, of course, Manchester United against Arsenal, otherwise known as 11th against 8th these days. It's been bigged up. Anybody who'd think they were the last two Champions League winners, the way that telly and radio have bigged this one up. Yes, it's Monday night football. Yes, it's two historically great clubs. But yes, they're 11th and 8th. Liverpool, top of the table, 21 points. Manchester City, second, 16. Leicester City up to third, which tallies with all of my punditry since before a ball was kicked that we should be excited about Leicester City. West Ham United, scoring goals, creating chances, playing the ball through the lines, whisper it. Could they be hanging on the coattails of the likes of Leicester City to be the best of the rest? They're fourth currently and 12 points. Then it's Spurs in fifth. At the bottom of the Premier League table, Watford are propping everybody up. 2 points at the moment after 7 games. That's desperately worrying. But the caveat to that is, Watford fans, is my punditry suggests that with the amount of shots that they've had per game, 105 in all, that's the third best in the Premier League. So just start finishing your chances, polish up that back four, and you may well go on a run yet. Newcastle United second from bottom, 5 points. Aston Villa third from bottom, 5 points. Norwich 17th, 6 points. And Brighton 16th, 6 points. Those for me, those 5 clubs, probably throw Sheffield United in as well. Will be battling for the relegation spots without a shadow of a doubt. We're going to be coming to Monday night football. By the time you've listened to this podcast, you'll be getting ready to put your feet up. You've had what are you having for dinner tonight? Curry night tonight, is it? Bit of fish, bit of chicken, whatever it is. I hope you enjoy it. Put your feet up and watch 8th against 11th in the Premier League. Manchester United against Arsenal coming up with our special preview. Coming up shortly, another blockbuster interview with a fantastic name from the game of association football. Ian Wright and I fell out big time and very publicly a couple of years ago. So it was time to do the right thing, excuse the pun. Apologise and re-engage with the man I've known for 30 years. Personal, emotional and funny. Enjoy this sit down with Ian Wright.
The last word.
CT1 have created BT1 and it's creating such a stir in the industry. It's new on the shelves this week and it's flying out of the door. Social media attention, industry attention, my attention should be yours too. BT1, the ultimate bathroom sealant and adhesive, has blown the market away. Goodbye bacteria and fungal growth forever. It's scientifically impossible to grow any bacteria or fungus on BT1's new Tribrid technology. Did you know if you have mould in your home, you're more likely to have respiratory problems, allergies, or asthma, for example? BT1 is going to eliminate that for you in your bathroom. This ultimate sealant and adhesive is the only product you need to repair or install your bathroom. No more mould, no more fungus, no more bacteria, no more bad bathrooms. CT1 have done it again. So for your bathroom, use new BT1.
The last word with Stan Collymore.
Okay, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by a man that next year is 30 years since the Black Country Bard goes from Stafford Rangers to Crystal Palace.
That picture was awesome.
Have you seen that? That's a great picture. Firstly, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people behind us. That's it, me and you. Mm. I sent you a message in early spring or summer. And I want to apologise to you. And the reason why I want to apologise to you is for 2 reasons. One, I was in a place where I look at you going into Crystal Palace. It was the first time as well that I had come face to face with my blackness.
Right.
I'd been a kid growing up with a white family in Cannock, Staffordshire, with all white mates. So when I go down to Crystal Palace, age 20, I had to learn how to kiss my teeth. I had rice and peas right in. It was basmati rice with proper green peas in Cannock. That was my rice and peas. So that was I'm being deadly serious.
Yeah.
So going down to Crystal Palace, you became an instant hero to me because you were doing the business. There was a dressing room of big black personalities which I had never known.
Andy
Dad
Finn and all them.
Andy Gray, you, Solarco, Tony Finnegan, etc., etc., Eric Young. So I've always looked at you, and I know that Darren Byfield that I played at Villa with is exactly the same. He's a big Villa fan, but I remember actually Villa played Arsenal, and you come into the long concourse.
I remember, yeah.
And Darren came over and he was like, "You got to introduce me to Wrighty. You got to introduce me to Wrighty." Is that you are a huge figure in the black community. We tend not to have a big structure in the black community like other minorities do.
Yeah.
There's no black council, there's no black PFA, etc., etc. So when I go down age 20, you're this huge figure. And subsequently, every time that I've seen you on television or I've heard you on radio or I've seen you interviewed, is that the standards that, for me, Stan Collymore, you have to adhere to are much higher than everybody else's. I don't really give a fuck what a lot of other black players do, but you are do.
Right.
So my frustration and anger and jealousy of your popularity, of the way that everybody loves you, manifested itself and boiled up in a very nasty tweet that I sent you in open forum that was bang out of order. And it was bang out of order because it wasn't just sending somebody a spiteful message, it was sending somebody a spiteful message that I respect and admire and that means a lot to me. So I apologise, and it's important that I apologise.
Yeah, and Stan, you know, at the end of the day, you know what I mean, of course, you know, I was disappointed, but I've seen the journey you've been on, and it makes me sad simply because of the way people speak to you now it is, but in all the time that we've had this span. I remember there was a couple of times that Stan direct messaged me. The fact is that I'd never ever lost anything but love for you. And when I did retort with my fucking childish, terrible, it's one of those, Stan, that even when I think of what I sent back, it fucking hurts me deeply because I know what you go through on a daily basis. I know everything that's going on. So for me to fall to that standard and not give you whatever people say, we go back far. The respect of what you're going through, everything was happening. For me to just say, leave it to time, right? Leave it to time. I also have to apologise simply because when you speak about like Darren Byfield, all the community stuff, everything that was going on and what people think of me, I should not have done that. And it doesn't make no difference that you had the angle that you had. I could totally understand. Even when you're coming through, Stan, I was thinking, when is he going to play? I think one of the few times we played at Oldham, it was literally before we left, and it was me, you, Salak on Brighton up front. I think we beat them 3-2. We played well. And I remember on the coach stand, we was watching Romario. Remember that?
That's the bizarre thing. It wouldn't happen now. And kids, you bring like 101 a tape of 101 great goals
from Romario, and that's what we was talking about, Romario. And I think to myself, when you think back, Stan, and this is why I sent you the message saying, "Listen, Stan," because I'm thinking there, and people don't realise. You see some tweets what people send, they don't realise. Send it, and they send it like bam, it's gone off into the ether. They're not bothered. But you see some things, and you just feel like, why have you said that? What? That's so horrible. I was that person. I turned into that person that reacted like that, and I've never forgive myself for it, even though I apologise. But the main thing is I sent you the tweet telling you how much I love you and I'll always love you, and I reached out, and you know, to the point where people were texting me and WhatsApp saying, why are you doing that? Well, he slaughtered you, this and that. I said, no. Because of where we've come from, I had to do that. I literally had to do it. I didn't have to do it for any other reason other than I've always loved you, Stan. There's no reason not to. So I knew that at some stage it would have been all right, and now here we are.
The interesting thing about it is, and I kind of want to get the anatomy of what is, because the whole point of why I do this podcast, and Gary Neville's been incredibly candid, Carragher, Big John Hartson, who sent his love, broke down.
Yeah.
Don't want anybody breaking down today. But still in Petrov, likewise. Charlie Austin spoke to him last week about sort of leaving Southampton and having a spat with Ralph Hasenhuttl. Is that we all present an image of who we are, and the image of Ian Wright that most people get is happy, positive, funny, lively, effervescent. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that for me, as a young man, a very important stage in my life, living in Croydon, first time I've been at home, and then seeing this journey that you went on, Arsenal and England, and being this huge personality and character, is that my jealousy and frustration came because you did the Ian Wright show, and you invited me after I hit Ulrika Johnson.
Right.
And you embraced me as an equal. You said, come on, explain your side of what happened. It's unforgivable, but come on, and the platform is there to speak.
Yes.
And I'll never forget that. And also, there have been kindnesses. I've got a photo at home with you in the old 1930 Arsenal kit.
Yeah.
And you wrote on it, it's all love, Stan. And also I've got in my spare room at home, I've still got it, an alarm clock. We were with England and we went into Reading at a Curry's and I had no money on me. He said, I'll buy that. So he bought this alarm clock. I know it sounds bizarre, but there's been lots of kindnesses along the way. And my absolute anger and fear, and in this incredibly febrile environment of black players getting racially abused, of a lack of representation. The statistics are horrific in radio and television.
Yes, yeah.
And I saw Ian Wright on every single platform, and I thought, say more. Right. Please say more. Please, because of all of these things, whether it be Raheem that I know you've been outspoken about, and that's where that came from. It became a really deep-seated hurt and pain and jealousy that I needed to address within myself. You can only ever address something within yourself. You talk well about the game, but you've played the game. You've played at every level. But do you feel that knowing everything that you know about the lack of representation and whether it be, I don't think you can particularly be an aggressive black voice. Roy Keane can go on, you know, mate, and Roy Keane can say, I want to knock out Carlos Queiroz. I know if I said that, it'd be a slightly different reaction, or Graham Souness, or everybody has their role. Is that as this person that black players, black fans generally look at, but particularly the black community, you left the BBC and you said, I don't like the way that they're coming to me. Yeah. I'm a fucking England international. I've scored goals. I'm not Arsenal's record goal scorer. Do you understand? I've apologise about what I said, but do you understand the frustration from people like me that look at you and say, righty, you could blow the whole lid off everything?
Absolutely, Stan. And the thing about it is that when I got into the television, and there's a kind of a stereotypical kind of black person that you're supposed to be.
What is that? What was that for you when you retired? Did you feel you had to conform to a specific?
Well, it's not that you had to conform, but the way they brought you in, Stan, it was to my complaint was I've got stuff to say, and I'm the end jestery kind of funny quote or something like that, or the guy who's I remember in Japan I always wanted a kimono, and I said I want, and they said, why don't you wear it on? I said, yeah, I'll wear it on there. You know what I mean? But the fact is, that's my personality. But what I had the problem with them was they didn't give me, they weren't giving me the platform to speak about what I wanted to speak about. Because after a while, Stan, you know, you get your foot in the door and you think, yeah, this is going to be great. But they've kind of got a little place for you. And I found that my place was Alan Hansen would answer a question, maybe Alan Shearer would answer a question, wherever it is. And then just before it finishes, and then, you know, there's nothing left for me to analyse. And then there's some kind of little jokey vibe, and then they go to whatever they're going to.
So what's changed now?
Well, what's changed now is that after I'd done that piece, and it was a long piece, and I went through it, I went into it. They blew me out for 9 years. 9 years I never went back on the BBC. And the thing was, Niall Sloan, who's a dear friend now,
ITV, head of
ITV, he left BBC and he was seething with me doing that piece. Because I said it's not proper, it's not right. You know what I mean? I've got things to say. It seems like I can't say anything, everybody else can, and I don't like the way I'm being portrayed. I'm looking like fucking Uncle Tom. It's like the guy who's the jigaboo on there. Let's have it right. You know
so
what I mean?
you understand from my perspective
well,
that I see not only somebody that I watched sat on the bench at Wimbledon and you've scored an hat-trick and everybody's gone,
yeah, but
fucking hell, right, he's on it. That as a black man that's important, and you're important to me. John Barnes is important to me. What Raheem's come out and said is important to me. Because ultimately we want to get to a point whereby somebody hires you because of what you can do.
Absolutely.
But
then Stan, you get in there, you learn, and then you have, if I stayed in Stan, and you know what I mean, I wasn't at a situation, a stage now where I'm talking about it, where I do support all of those guys coming through now. I go on their platforms, it's what I can give back. I make sure that they want me for what it's in, and I'm not afraid to say what I want to say, but at the time when it was happening, I wasn't doing it, and I was recognising it all the time. I've got more.
Is that the balance between having to grasp the opportunity when it's given?
Yes.
And say, right, I have to adhere to. It's almost like a football thing when a manager says, "I'm a central striker, but I'm going to stick you out on the left."
On the wing, yeah.
Emil Heskey said the other day,
played for a while.
I played on the left for a while, but then I want to be a forward. I want to have the same airtime as Shearer or
that's all it was.
Neville or Lineker.
And so when I came out and done my piece saying it, That was me saying, well, fuck it. If I can't do it and do it how I want to do it, now people see how I'm doing it now, and I get the credit for it, then I'm not doing it.
The Last Word with Stan Collymore.
Thanks to Wrighty for joining me at Wembley Stadium, and thanks to Wembley Stadium for hosting us recently. You can get the full 45-minute interview as a bonus drop on Friday, and of course all of our big interviews are on YouTube in beautiful, rich 4K.
Stan Collymore.
It's Monday, and that doesn't just mean the Last Word podcast with Stan Collymore. It means Monday night football. We've got a cracker for you. Manchester United against Arsenal. It's not 1 and 2 like it was 10, 15 years ago. It's 11th against 8th. Let's have a look at the two tails of the tape, if you like. Of course, Manchester United lost the game last week against West Ham United, but they are unbeaten in 12 at Old Trafford, going back to 2006 against the Gunners. United have lost 3 of their last 6 home games, which is fairly normal for a team that is fairly new. You've got the likes of Wan-Bissaka, of course, and Harry Maguire coming into the team, but they will need to perform better tonight to get a result against Arsenal that do score a lot of goals, but they're conceding a lot as well. They've conceded at least 2 in their last 4 Premier League games, and they've taken 8 points from a last possible 15. But they have a real threat up front. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Saka, Pepe, the new record signing, £70-odd million, could take massive advantage of the likes of Lindelof, Young, Wan-Bissaka and Maguire. You've got a real mishmash there of players from Sir Alex Ferguson's era, David Moyes, Louis van Gaal, and of course, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I still don't think David De Gea is the David De Gea of 2 or 3 years ago. So that defensive unit is a defensive unit that is about 11th or 12th in the Premier League. As for Arsenal, not great themselves at the back. Socrates, Maitland-Niles, Luis Kolasinac. I've gone into Luis several times this season. An absolute liability at times. And I don't think the other players around him. Maitland-Niles is going to be one for the future, so we take him out of the criticism. Leno is a good, steady Eddie goalkeeper, nothing more, nothing less. And Socrates and Kolasinac, if they were playing for Bournemouth, you wouldn't bat an eyelid, but they're playing for Arsenal. I'm going for 2-2. I think it will be an entertaining game, but all it will just confirm is that these two may not even make the best of the rest this season.
Now on The Last Word with Stan Collymore, Stan's stats.
Right, let's get the stats with Stan from this week. Most goals scored, Leicester City, 5 against Newcastle United. The most shots in a game, Chelsea with 23 in their game against Brighton and Hove Albion. Least shots in a game, Newcastle United 3 at the KP. Most shots on target, unsurprisingly, Manchester City with 11. Least shots on target. I told you earlier, I told you from day one of the season when Brighton had scored 3 goals, they only had 3 shots in that game. Least shots on target at match day 7, Brighton with 1. Watch that. That's going to be a problem if you're a Seagull. Most completed passes. Is it Liverpool? Is it Manchester City? Is it Spurs? No. Leicester City with 642 and the most tackles, the grafters, the grinders. Southampton in their loss against Tottenham Hotspur. The tackling did nothing. But West Ham United, it didn't do too bad. They got a point down at the Vitality Stadium, both with 34 tackles each. Those are your stats with Stan.
The Last Word.
It's time for the news with Stan. I like 3 stories, 3 to 5 stories actually, non-Premier League related. This one kind of is. Gareth Southgate for Spurs. Some of the news outlets reporting the England boss potentially the next Tottenham Hotspur manager if Maurizio Pochettino are to leave. Now, I know Gareth. I've played with him twice in my career. We were young boys at Crystal Palace. Making our way. He made his league debut away at Liverpool, and I made my away debut at Liverpool on the same day, and then he was my captain at Aston Villa. I know him, he's solid, he's certainly no yes man that a lot of England fans were thinking before he went into the job. Now, of course, they love him, and they wear a Gareth Southgate waistcoat when England play after a fantastic World Cup. But the difference between going from having 6 or 7 very, very good performances for the national team to then doing it week in and week out for Tottenham Hotspur, I think is a bit of a jump for Gareth at the moment. I think he would possibly say the same, although if he was offered the job, I've no doubt that he would seriously consider it and possibly even take it. But I think that what Tottenham Hotspur need to do is throw every last bit of disposable income and cash at Maurizio Pochettino and nail this man down at your club for the next 2, 3, 4 years. Whoever you're going to get in isn't going to be as good as Poch. Vincent Kompany and Anderlecht are our second story. Why? Because they're 13th in the Belgian table. This is the equivalent of Manchester United being 18th, 19th, maybe in the relegation scrap. Went there with a huge pomp and circumstance and fanfare, of course, having been an Anderlecht legend and then going on to Germany and then coming, of course, to play in the Premier League with aplomb for over a decade. But time is ticking. A 0-0 draw against Waasland Beveren is not going to pull up any trees in the Belgian First Division. They're expecting him to push on, get into the Champions League, compete in Europe, the next big managerial name. But unless he pulls his finger out, he's going to go the same way as a certain Thierry Henry that went into Monaco, a club that he played for with great aplomb before going to Italy and then becoming an English football legend. Sound familiar? He went to Monaco with huge fanfare, but only lasted 3 months at the Monegasque club. So I hope it works out for Vincent Kompany. He's a cracking lad. We saw with his testimonial donating the every penny to charities worth while causes in Manchester. But in terms of the job that he's doing at Anderlecht at the moment, it isn't going down very well at all. 13th in the Belgian table. And the final story is Bernardo Silva. I want to add my 2 penneth in because I'd like to think of myself as a anti-racism campaigner. And also 50% of my heritage is black, 50% is white. I live in an exclusively white town in Cannock, almost, except for me. Almost exclusively, and have done for 48 years. So I'd like to think that I understand from my mates and growing up in a predominantly white background, they need to stop moaning political correctness gone mad philosophy and mentality. I hear it a lot when I'm around in various towns. And also my blackness, which says a caricature of a biscuit man, a caricature of a gollywog on a jam jar, a caricature of the black and white minstrels, was simply designed and aimed to make black people look less than human. And if you are made to look less than human, then people will treat you less than human. Black people were hung, black people were flogged, black people were enslaved because people that enslaved them or belittled them felt they were less than human because of the start point, which was caricatures of their less than. So when people say to me, does it really matter? Bernardo Silva's having a bit of a lend of his mate who just happens to be black. There was no reference to his colour. That's Raheem Sterling's argument today in a lot of the papers. Does it really matter? It's banter. If you've never had racism or never seen the consequences of it, yes, then it's banter because it's never affected you. You don't give a flying fig if a black man walks down the road is being monkey chanted or whatever. You'd probably get the ump if he was violently attacked or if you saw it and you wanted, of course, as a good human being that you are listening, you would say that's wrong. But something like, Bernardo Silva putting a tweet of a black man, big red lips and eyes, the sort of caricature, isn't a problem in your eyes if that's the way that you think. And of course, that's been compounded, not only with John Barnes, the interview's coming in 2 or 3 weeks, he's very strident that it was just banter, that Bernardo Silva said it was just banter, and Benjamin Mendy said it was banter. But Benjamin Mendy doesn't speak for me. Benjamin Mendy hasn't had my history in the United Kingdom of racism, of having 2 arrests for racism on Twitter for people using caricatures of me. Benjamin Mendy is French. He's coming and he's working in England. Bernardo Silva is Portuguese, he works in England. The message to both of them is, think a little bit more. It's not just banter. And in very, very strange right-wing political times, it gives grist to the mill of people that want to keep people that have different colours, different religions, different ethnicities, pushed a little bit further down. So I would say to both of them, just apologise. Don't make excuses for it, Pep. Don't make excuses for it, Raheem. Apologise. Don't do it again. And let the 1.5 million, 2 million black and Asian people in this country not have to wake up to Twitter and be caricatured as simple, as stupid and as idiotic, because we're not.
The Last Word with Stan Collymore.
That's the news and that's your lot for this week. Don't forget to stick your notifications on to get the very latest content and big interviews. See you next week.
The Last Word.
Asthma and allergies in the home are rising. Our homes are more insulated, great for keeping heat in, but not good for asthma and allergy sufferers, as this allows those nasties to grow in your home. BT1, the ultimate bathroom sealant and adhesive, also has a NAF, NAAF accreditation. The Norwegian Asthma and Allergy Association gives it their stamp of approval, and those Norwegians do things properly, we know that. The only sealant globally to achieve this, CT1 and BT1. It's going to reduce the risk of asthma attacks in the home.
This is a Listening Dog Media production.